This video is sponsored by Alpha Draft, where you can play fantasy esports such as League of Legends, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Dota 2, Smite. You can play most of the leagues, have different days. Sometimes they have a bunch of play days mixed together. If you're good, you can win money, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands given away weekly. Links in the description box below. Now, analysis desks in esports are actually a relatively new phenomenon. Like in Counter-Strike, we've only really had them from sort of late 2013 onwards. They had a little bit of them in as much as sometimes they just had casters at the event who also had a desk type segment where they spoke in the general realm of what analysis desks would be. For other games, you have them going back a little bit further, but a similar sort of time period, you know, in general before you really get them. Obviously, they hearken to real traditional sports where you have the halftime show and the pre-game show, and that's different from the casters talking. That's different from what they talk about between matches or whatever, depending on what the scenario is. You send it back up to the desk, and you have the punditry, and you have the old star player, and you have sometimes journalists who are involved, and they set up the game, and they set everything up for you. And so because it's a relatively new concept in esports, and it's something I've done a lot, I've done something like, when I calculated it, I've done 18 CSGO events where I was on the analysis desk. So something I have quite a lot of experience with. I've thought about it a lot. I thought about it a lot in the past of my career. It's a role I was always interested in pursuing. And so when it was presented for me, in essentially sort of created for me in CSGO by Grey Khan from DreamHack, because they knew they could use me as someone, as that sort of a figure, where pro players, you can have them for mainly casting as well. And it's kind of like you needed someone in the community who could do that, because for other games, they've got a bunch of these people. So since I've done it a lot and I've thought about the technical aspects of it and I've tried to decide, you know, what's my philosophy going to be on the desk and how's it going to go, I understand, I can empathize with some fans who are newer to the concept or who are just a little bit confused as to where does casting end, where does analysis begin, what is the role of analysis desk, so as a result, how do they gauge, what is the metric for what good analysis desk work is. So I'm going to talk about what I think the role of the desk should be and my philosophy to it. Because one of the main realms of how complaints tend to be phrased about it is that they nearly always are people who are frustrated with a lack of tactical insight. They don't think there's enough specifics about the tactics the team will run, and how that meta game of tactical battling will end up deciding the game. Because it's true, in a game of Counter-Strike, at the top level, between teams that are even vaguely, if not skill-wise, evenly matched up, just vaguely matched up in terms of the stylistic matchup, is a good mixture, so each has a chance to win. It will generally be good tactical play, whether that's execution of simple tactics or coming up with brilliant, in-depth, intricate tactics which pick apart the team, which will ultimately usually decide who wins the game. It's not just kills. Kills are the vehicle by which those tactics then play out in unexpected or expected or executional manners. Overall, it's the tactical world that will decide these games. So I can understand why, perhaps naively, some fans will get caught up in that and think that should be the role of the analyst. And if he doesn't do that, that means he doesn't understand that aspect of the game. That means he thinks the game is just mechanical and kills, or it's just history and what happened in the past. And he's failing to give us what the analyst's job is in this particular sense. Here's the problem. First and foremost, you have to break down how these things work. So I'm going to break down in a model I've been using and thinking about quite a lot recently, and I've used in other videos for other games. Which is that when you think about a team, you should break it down into a hierarchy, on my model at least, at the moment, for when I'm talking these topics, of there's 3 levels. Level 1, the top level that you have to get correct for the others to function. Level 1 is the identity of the team. Who's in the team, the personnel. There's a strong player who plays this position. Here's our carry player. Here's my supportive player. Here's the strengths of those players. Here's the weaknesses of those players. And as a collective unit, here's the strengths and weaknesses. I've identified that. Then there's the strategy, the general style they play. If it's Counter-Strike, do they play a very defensive style? Do they play a trade kill style? Do they play a style where in early points of the game, when it's pistol rounds they're at their strongest, are they strong on save rounds? Do they need full weaponry? Then you've got the tactics, which is how you're going to apply your strategy then with the personnel you have to the game itself. These are the very specific things you are going to do. Tactics are different from strategy. So the tactics are going to be who we're going to get a gun onto at this point in time, how we're going to play this exact situation within the bounds of we're going to play it aggressively, we're going to play early on in the rounds, we're going to now trade kill this sort of person, and the flash is going to come in here, and the smoke will always follow up. And this is how we'll rotate back out of a site and how we'll retake a site slowly or quickly or try to get the jump on them and break the defense. Whatever it's going to be, the tactics are all there. Now, the key thing to understand is that from my perspective, the majority of the role of the analyst, if not all of it, exists in level 1, identity, identifying the team, the personnel, explaining that, and the strategy, the overall approach, and where they overall match up these teams with each other relative to all the teams in the world and on these maps. The tactical stuff, the specifics of it, belong inside the game with the casters, because that's where it's going to take place, inside the game. That's where it's most appropriate to talk about it. That's the most appropriate place to reference it, and that's where you have the most time to discuss those nitty-gritty details, because you have potentially hours as a caster. As an analyst desk analyst, you might have 5 minutes to talk about the whole thing and set up who the teams are, how they're going to match up, how they're going to play. You might have 5 minutes, you might have 10 minutes. You don't have a whole lot of time. You can't be fucking around with some of that intricate detail there. Secondly, because it can be consigned, sent over to the guys who are the casters, you get a scenario to do more with what you do in the identity and the strategy realm on the analysis desk by focusing on that. And so, in general, I think that allows overall all 3 levels to be taken care of in a way they wouldn't be if the people on the analysis desk only tried to do the bottom level, the tactical stuff, and didn't do all the rest of it. So wouldn't set up the rest of the game. That's very important. And as a result, you wouldn't get a complete viewing experience. And so as a result, people don't want to see just tactics. It would be way too much. It would turn off so many casual fans. If they want it, they're going to get it inside the game anyway. We need to help them with some of the other aspects for the expertise they don't know within the punditry realm of what do I think of this team, what do I think of their style, what do I think of this player, how do I evaluate matchups, these sorts of things. That's what the analysis desk should be more about. It should be more about punditry than direct analysis. So that's an area I can also understand and sympathise with fans, in as much as the term is a bit misleading, because analysis probably should be around the area to a degree of tactics and stuff. That would be part of analysis. But so is identifying the strategy and looking at the personnel and how they match up. That's also a big part of it. So as a general approach, my approach is it should be way less about tactics, because we don't have the time or the tools to do so. Although I have seen interesting cases, like for example, sometimes if you have a replay, you can go over something. With Gfinity, they had a really interesting thing they tried at the last one I did, Gfinity Summer Masters 1, where they gave me a heat map tool for the whole map. And then I would check it through the games, and if there was interesting trends, they would give me 5 minutes or so where I could use that to kind of link it into some of the tactical aspects, and then overall more about the strategy then. Like, okay, you see they tended to use a lot of fast attacks onto the A site here, but they're only getting kills in these areas, so something was breaking down there, and we saw in the game from key situations, this player wasn't having the impact, and the rotation wasn't here, otherwise you'd have seen kills here. That actually gave me a tool where I could then do some of this tactical stuff, where it had an application on the analysis desk. But in general, that should be away from it. It should be more the general strategy of the teams, the identity of who these teams are, what players they're made up of, how they'll compare to the others, team matchups, how stylistically they approach. It's a very aggressive T-side team, very defensive CT-side team. This is how the battle should work in the middle of there, on the line where they'll meet. And here's the matchups, these sorts of stars against these stars, against an overall skill level of this, but a tactical team over here. The historical context, this is one of the greatest teams, top 4 at the last 3 events. When they faced this team 2 times before, it came down to this sort of map. This sort of stuff is more what the analysis desk is about, in my opinion. This is the role, because we're setting up the context for beginners, for people who already know a lot. We're reminding them, we're setting the baseline on what it's going to be like, and we're doing the prep work for the casters, so that in theory they shouldn't have to talk about that stuff. People will come into the game knowing the context of the players, the team that they play on, the recent history of the team, the contextual historical aspect of where the team is, where the players are, within all this, how they'll match up, general predictions and punditry for the game, and then the casters come in, take that, maybe even reference some of it, and start casting the game, the specifics of the plays that are happening, the tactics that are happening now, and how that links into what we've set up for them. We've set the table for these guys. That's the caster's job to break that down. Now, here's the thing. When you're talking about these players and teams and matchups, you can break it down even further. And this is why, with the amount of time that you have on desks, you can't be going into the tactic. It has to stay in this area, because this has its own depth to it. People think it's just saying, oh, that team won 3 tournaments recently, so they must be good, right? And, oh, I think this team's good on Inferno or something. Oh, and yeah, they'll win because fuck Nip, right? They're shit, right? They're a bad opponent. No, it's not that at all. Here's how you can break down further the analytical aspect. Okay, so there's the historical content. That approach that I'm obviously a big proponent of, where you look at like past times they played, you look at the recent matches that they played in like a semi-final or offline, or when these 2 players were on different teams, how they played. Now you can look at just general form of the teams. So how is this team doing against the whole field, against all the tournaments they're going to recently? Oh, well, they're a top 3 level team. And oh, but if they play this specific opponent, they become a top 2 team suddenly. And then there's the skill component. Okay, let's look In terms of the specific players, how are the teams going to match up skill-wise? And then how is player for player? Orpa versus Orpa, Guardian versus Skadoodle. How are star players like Shocks going to go up against Get Right? How is that mixture going to work there? Then we look at specific playing styles of the players. So now let's look at, this guy has a very unique playing style in that way. This will interact with another one in that sense. Once you've gotten through all of that, and you won't get through all of it, you already have to pick and choose and really decide, right, on this one I'm going to go on that, I'm going to have to do less on that. There's no time for tactics, and it would be inappropriate. We already have a 2 to 3 hour vehicle for that the casters can give you. Now, another key point to make about the role of analysis desks is that they should be for people who have high degrees of proficiency in articulation, being able to not just think up an idea, but to actually get the idea and be able to communicate it, to translate it from an abstract idea or from something in the past or something they've seen into something they can explain to you, hopefully quickly in simple language, get the point across and have their ideas interact with other people and be vetted in that sense, be able to go back and forth in that particular sense. Having game knowledge alone, which a lot of pro players do have, doesn't mean that you've developed your thought processes. Also, having individual game knowledge or of game knowledge of your team and people you've played isn't the same as game knowledge of watching VODs of all the top teams and watching them as a spectator. So just having the knowledge doesn't mean you've then developed the thought processes of how you'll model that information and how you'll store it and how you'll make connections and form equations between the information. Ideally, an analyst should have a very clear philosophy on how he's going to do that, on how he analyzes the games, what criteria is most important to him, how styles match up against each other, and then he absolutely must have articulation skills. He must have a talent for talking. He must develop this. He must develop not just his thinking, but then how he speaks and how he explains himself and understanding what the gap is going to be between what he thinks and knows and what the fan or the viewer knows and thinks, and how to bridge that very quickly with a shorthand sometimes so he can build it up over time, or with a specific point that's illustrated well, or he puts the emphasis in the right area or gives the right example that they really understand it quite quickly, instead of having to have a 20-hour lecture on that topic and read a thesis, which you can't do in that amount of time. It actually, in some senses, bearing in mind articulation is how you get it from your brain into the physical world as little vibrations in the air that go into someone's ear bones and then register a sound, or through the fucking internet into them. Because of this difficult process at the end, to a degree, because that's going to be a limiting factor on how good you can be, it almost matters less what you think than how you think, how you model it, how you relate it, why you think that way, so you know why you think that way, so that then you can explain why you think that way, you can go back and forth with people, you can set up interesting debates, and then being able to actually explain yourself, to say what you think, to translate it. There are very few pros can articulate well or get their thoughts into words. Like, there's a concept for people who haven't worked on camera, who haven't thought about this a lot, like the effect of ideas and words and speech, which is that you might think to yourself naively, well, when I think in my own head, I think in English, if you're from a native English-speaking country, and I think in words, and then to speak, it's easy. I just take the words that I'm saying, pop them down into my mouth, and out they come, like a cartoon, a speech bubble. That's really, when you think about it, if you put a lot of thought into these things, not really how it works at all. You don't really think in words. You have some words in there. That tends to be when you're thinking about the thought, though. The thought tends to be this amorphous thing within the mind's eye, which is sort of like a mixture of images and feelings and facts coalescing around. And then what happens is a thought tends to be actually that thing there, which I could call a thought in a way. A thought tends to be your own internal commentary on the thought, which is like, okay, that image of what that is, and I think of that player in this way, and you start to assign things, and he's a good player, and his strengths are here, and you're doing all that. And then to speak, you have to think to yourself, right, so of the commentary I've got of the thought related there, so we're going down in levels already, we're already losing information. With this model I've got, which parts of that are important? Where do I start with that? What do I connect to that? Which part do I omit because it would be too lengthy in that particular sense? This is very difficult. This is actually kind of a principle I took from Hindu metaphysics, believe it or not. The idea that there is like spiritual truth, which then becomes the idea of what that means, which then becomes what you're trying to say to someone. And as you go through this process, it's like a filtering process. So at the end, unfortunately, no matter how good a job you do, they'll never truly have direct gnosis, connection to that spiritual truth in the way that you did, because the process means that as it comes out in the human body and out into the world of little mouth noises from fucking primates that can walk and talk, it doesn't manage to hold that same gravity of what it was at that point in time. That's the problem. So if you understand this, you'll know why generally articulation skills are a high premium should be placed on them for people on analysis desks. There's also the factor that it doesn't matter how good your game knowledge is, even how good your articulation is, even how good your modeling is, all these things, if you can't fill in this last section, which is in general, if you want to be one of the best analysts and you want to really make an analysis desk flow and be entertaining and fun and always have a level of quality, you must have the entertainment factor. You can call this showmanship, show business. The idea that there are these personas as well, and there's personalities here, and there's entertainment factor. It's not just saying interesting things, it's saying them in a way that's compelling and makes people think things and have a reaction to them, quite a visceral or sometimes a polarizing reaction. And there's banter, there's jokes that keep things loose and lubricate the discussion and allow us sometimes to go from a very serious topic into a fun topic, which then gives us time to have a breather to go back into another serious topic later, or to alleviate some of the tension that's in the particular desk at the moment. The good thing about banter and entertainment that you have to understand is that, first of all, it's great for filling time. Esports events, particularly Counter-Strike, have indeterminate amounts of downtime. DDoSes, computer issues, people arguing over rules, sometimes teams taking long time outs, teams taking more time between maps, sometimes like problems at the venue, like actual equipment issues where they can't start a stage match, the internet gets fucked up, whatever it might be, you just get thrown on air and you have to be able to fill time. Now, yes, you can fill a lot of time. Ideally, I like to do this with a lot of more stuff about the game, more about the history, more about some interesting things there, more about general things about the scene. But the problem is there's going to become certain points where either you've gone over that too much and now you're overselling the game and now you're actually turning people off and now you've almost lost some of the momentum and the great concise job you did of setting it all up, giving just the right information, omitting all the stuff that's too much right now. If you keep going too much on that, it's gonna be overselling. It's actually gonna turn people off. At that point, you have to be able to fill time with fun stuff, with jokes, with banter, with just trying to be entertaining, trying to make levity, trying to make the situation so it's not so serious, so that then once we know, right, now we've got 2 minutes before we're going live again, now you build back up again. You're going right down in the level, low energy, you're getting there, you're going through, and then you're just going to ramp up a little bit again, and here's a few more points, and now we're into the game with our casters, go now, throw over to them. It also, when you have good banter and the entertainment and the showman factor, it creates synergy. Because first of all, you know these are just jokes. You know that we're all trying to accomplish that. We're all on the same team. Even if it looks like I deliver some zinger to Anders and he has to take it like the straight man, like, you got me there. He doesn't have a comeback. That's just to have a funny moment. Sometimes to fill time. We're all trying to accomplish something, which is make it entertaining for the viewers. The fact that in this fictional world, I get to fire the shot and he gets to get hit by the bullet, well, just like in a TV show, if you're the guy playing the guy firing the gun and you're the guy playing the guy getting shot, it's not the same as real life. You're not actually getting shot. It's not actually a problem. And sometimes it's even better to be the guy who takes the shot. Like if you're amazing at dying in movies or whatever, you'd be better off doing that role than being like, I want to be the one who shoots the gun. It's the childish way to think, isn't it? It's a show. We're all taking part in this and we're all trying to put on the best show for everyone. Also, showmanship and banter allow segments to be entertaining almost regardless of the outcome or the play that takes place within the game. So they make for this aspect makes for a really good fallback. Because if it was an ideal world, I'd love it if every game was fucking amazing, elite level Counter-Strike with the best teams in the world. So all we had to talk about was how high level this is and how fucking incredible and what this means about the next game. That's not going to happen though. At every tournament, you're going to have shit games. You're going to have ultra stomps that's not that much to say about. You're going to have games which actually would become boring if you went too in depth on it because they don't warrant it. And so one of the ways you can still make that segment interesting, still make people be interested, be compelled to watch and see what you're going to say and see how it matches up, is to have banter, to have entertainment, to have fun stuff. Makes for a great fallback to ensure a certain level of entertainment and quality is there. It also gives people an extra reason to watch the game. I know there must be some people who watch the game just to go, I want to see if he was wrong about that. This next game, I don't really care about these two teams. But hey, he said this team would stomp that one. They'd be very convincing in that sense. And he almost then they made the joke and he all right, I'll bet you they do. And then I bet it is 2-1. And it gives another reason, a reason to get in the game. It gives you some juice in the game. It gives you some skin in the game, a reason to want one team to win or to lose. And finally, there's the theatre aspect. There's an aesthetic pleasure in funny jokes or witty banter or tying a crazy analogy or metaphor into actually a point you were trying to make about analysis, which you notice, I almost never give an analogy or a metaphor if it just is abstract and has nothing to do with the game. I think, because that's how I think of it. I think of what happened in the game. So I think of, oh, this player's a bit like that. Then I think of the metaphor or the analogy, and that's why I relate it in there, sometimes with humorous aspects to make a crazy point, but it always has to have a basis in analysis of itself. So it has its own merits on which it can be judged, whether you like it or not. This is a really important role the analyst does, because of how it can facilitate everyone else, cover for everyone else, fill time, be a fallback to make sure the thing's really interesting, and we can cover the totality, the holistic approach to the game. So I actually want to make a point here, which I haven't really made in the past, but I think it's quite important. Sometimes I go back and I watch old VODs, not just from esports like CSGO, but other ones, League of Legends, Dota 2, Quake. Now in CSGO, I've noticed there's a tendency on YouTube for people to just cut the analyst desk and go straight into a pistol round of the game. Now, the problem is they might think, right, great, you don't have to listen to all the analyst desk. That's bad actually for history, though, because ideally you'd have the pre- and post-match analysis, because that way when someone's watching the game in the future, they're now going to be able to actually understand the context of, what's going on with this player here. What was this team doing at the time? Why is it significant that they're playing these maps? What's the expectation of who should win and how they should win and what the general strategy would be? This helps you put yourself into that period in time, even if you know what happens afterwards, and understand why it's going to happen. And that's going to, just as the original viewer would have enjoyed it, this will be integral to your enjoyment. It really helps for this historical stuff. I know, because I personally benefit so much. When I was getting into League of Legends, I watched all the on-game net, the top Korean League of Legends games in their OGN champions. And being able to watch at the beginning of the VOD, the analysis desk type segment, it's not really a desk, it's just the commentators talking before doing this job, of people like Monte Cristo, experts, giving me the breakdown of the game, help me know what is the meta at the moment. What is this player's champion pool? What are the player matchups here? What is strong at the moment? How is the synergy going to affect the game? It's so important. And for CSGO at the moment, we're kind of shortchanging ourselves by not always having that in the game. So I think it would be great if we could have that in. Hopefully, though, now people see the importance and the role of the analyst desk and what it is and what it isn't for.